Elena had always believed that hard work could build walls strong enough to protect her from chaos. She grew up in a small, noisy household where her parents constantly argued about bills, and her younger sister Clara was always the center of attention. From the moment Elena was old enough to understand responsibility, she had promised herself she'd never depend on anyone. At 21, she began working full-time as an accountant while studying at night, saving every possible cent. At 31, she finally achieved what she once thought was impossible. She bought her own home. It wasn't big or luxurious, but it was hers. A modest, pale brick cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by oak trees and the soft scent of blooming jasmine. Every inch of it represented her sacrifices, the skipped vacations, the sleepless nights, and the countless times she said no to fleeting pleasures so she could say yes to her future. Her parents had always called her the reliable one. Whenever her father needed help with paperwork or her mother with groceries, Elena was the one who showed up. And though she never said it aloud, she took pride in being dependable. Clara, on the other hand, was everything Elena wasn't: charming, impulsive, and endlessly reckless. Where Elena saved, Clara spent. Where Elena worked quietly, Clara dreamed loudly. She drifted from one failed job to another, convinced that luck would eventually carry her somewhere grand. When she wasn't working, she was online, chasing trends, buying designer bags she couldn't afford, and posting pictures as if she were living a glamorous life. For years, Elena watched from a distance, disapproving but silent. She didn't want to be the older sister who lectured or criticized. She thought Clara would grow up eventually, that maybe time would teach her what responsibility meant. But time didn't teach Clara, it spoiled her. And when everything came crashing down, it wasn't Clara who paid the price. It was Elena. The call came one Thursday evening. Elena was sitting by her living room window, sipping tea after a long day at work. The sunset painted the sky in gold and amber hues, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful, until her phone buzzed. It was her mother. "Elena, come home. We need to talk," her mother said, her tone strained and anxious. Elena's stomach tightened. What happened? Is someone sick? No, her mother replied quickly. Just come, please. When Elena arrived at her parents' house, the familiar smell of old furniture and her mother's cooking greeted her, but the warmth she used to associate with home was gone. Her father sat at the dining table, staring at the floor. Her mother looked pale, her hands clasped tightly around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. And Clara was there too, sitting silently, mascara smudged, eyes red from crying. Her mother broke the silence first. "Your sister's in trouble." Elena crossed her arms. "What kind of trouble this time?" Clara sniffled dramatically. "I made a few bad choices, okay? But I didn't mean for it to get this bad." Her father exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It's serious, Elena. She owes money. A lot of money." "How much?" Elena asked, already feeling a familiar dread creeping up her spine. "Almost 100,000, her mother whispered. Elena's jaw tightened. "What?" "She took loans. For her business idea," her father explained, avoiding her eyes. "And when that failed, she used her credit cards. Now the collectors are calling. They even came to the house." Elena stared at Clara in disbelief. 100,000? Clara, are you insane? You don't even have a job. I was trying to start something. Clara shouted, defensive. You wouldn't understand. You've always played it safe. You never take risks. This isn't about risk. This is about stupidity. Elena snapped back. Her mother slammed her hand on the table. Enough, we're a family. Families help each other. Elena turned to her mother, her voice cold. And what exactly do you want me to do? Her father hesitated before speaking. You have that house. The air left the room. Elena blinked, unsure if she heard him right. My house? What about it? Her mother looked at her pleadingly. If you sold it, we could clear her debt. Just think about it, Elena. You're doing well. You could always buy another one later. Elena felt the floor tilt beneath her. You're asking me to sell the only thing I've ever worked for, because she couldn't control herself? She's your sister, her mother shouted, tears brimming in her eyes. Would you rather see her in jail? Elena stood still, her pulse pounding in her ears. All her life, she had carried the weight of being the responsible one. But this was beyond duty. This was robbery wrapped in guilt. She took a deep breath. You can't be serious. Her father spoke softly. We'll pay you back, I promise. Once things get better. When have things ever gotten better, Dad? She said bitterly. Clara stood up suddenly, grabbing Elena's hands. Please, Lena, I'll change, I swear. I'll pay you back every cent. Elena looked into her sister's teary eyes and saw desperation, but not remorse. Still, under the crushing pressure of her parents' expectations, her mother's sobs, and her father's weary silence, something inside her cracked. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The next few weeks blurred together in a fog of paperwork, signatures, and sleepless nights. Her house, her sanctuary, was gone. The day she handed over the keys, Elena stood in the empty living room and felt her throat tighten. The faint scent of jasmine from the garden drifted through the window, a cruel reminder of everything she had built and lost. Her mother called that night to say how proud she was of her. You did the right thing, she said warmly. You saved your sister. Elena hung up the phone and sat on her mattress, now placed in a cramped rented apartment, staring at the ceiling. She should have felt proud, but all she felt was hollow. Her parents stopped calling as often after that. Clara sent a few texts about how she was turning her life around, but Elena could already sense the familiar pattern of lies behind those words. Weeks passed, then months. The family moved on as if nothing had happened, as if Elena's sacrifice were an ordinary gesture, expected and unremarkable. But she couldn't move on. Every time she walked past a flower shop or a row of cozy houses, she thought of what she'd lost. The jasmine she'd planted by the porch, the coffee she'd brewed every morning while sunlight spilled through her kitchen window. Her peace, her independence. She began to see her parents differently, not as protectors, but as people who had learned to use guilt as currency. And Clara, the sister she had once defended, was no longer a careless dreamer. She was a manipulator who knew exactly which strings to pull. Late one night, unable to sleep, Elena opened her old photo album. There she was, standing proudly in front of her new home, holding the keys, smiling like she had conquered the world. That woman felt like a stranger now. She touched the photograph and whispered, "You deserved better." From that night onward, something inside her began to harden. The kindness she had always carried, the willingness to fix what others broke, started to fade. She wasn't bitter yet, but she was awakening. Elena didn't know it then, but this betrayal would become the turning point of her life. The family that had taught her to love unconditionally had also taught her the cost of that love. And as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, one thought kept echoing in her mind, not of revenge yet, but of realization. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it means loss disguised as loyalty. That night, she finally allowed herself to cry. But unlike before, her tears weren't for what she had lost. They were for the woman who would never be the same again. And somewhere deep inside that grief, quietly and invisibly, her transformation began. The months after selling her house dragged by like a slow gray storm. Each morning, Elena woke up in her cramped rented apartment with a bitter taste in her mouth, as though regret itself had seeped into her lungs. The place smelled faintly of paint and damp wood, a far cry from the jasmine-scented air that once filled her little cottage. The walls felt closer each day, pressing in, suffocating her under the weight of decisions she couldn't undo. In the first few weeks, she tried to convince herself she had done the right thing. Family comes first, she repeated like a prayer whenever her chest grew tight. But with every passing day, that phrase began to sound more like a curse than a comfort. Her parents rarely called after the sale was complete. The constant urgency that once filled their voices had vanished, replaced by casual indifference. Clara, on the other hand, had gone silent. At first, Elena thought her sister was embarrassed, maybe even remorseful. But then came the rumors. A colleague from her office mentioned seeing Clara in town, laughing with friends at an expensive restaurant. Another said she spotted her driving a new silver car. Each story scraped away the fragile illusion Elena had tried to build around her sacrifice. The more she heard, the more she began to question everything her family had told her. One evening, she decided to drive past her parents' house, her old home still fresh in her memory. The streets looked the same, but her heart didn't. Through the window, she could see warm lights glowing and hear distant laughter. Clara's car, a shiny, newer model, sat parked in the driveway. Her chest tightened. For weeks, she'd been eating instant noodles, skipping nights out, and cutting corners to rebuild her savings, while Clara seemed untouched, glowing even. She stayed in the car for a long time, watching through the windshield, feeling invisible. Her parents were inside. The same people who once told her that money doesn't matter, now sitting comfortably in a home that her sacrifice had saved. That night, back in her apartment, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying the moment her mother had said, "You have that house." The memory burned in her skull. Why had they chosen her to fix Clara's mistakes? Why was her pain so disposable? The questions clawed at her insides, growing louder with each sleepless night. Weeks later, the truth came to her like a knife disguised as kindness. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when her phone rang. The number was familiar. Daniel, an old college friend who now worked at the bank. He had been one of the few people Elena trusted with her financial paperwork back when she bought the house. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Elena," he began, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I think you should know. When your house was sold, your parents added their names to the sale agreement." Elena froze. "What are you talking about?" "They claimed it was family property. Legally, it gave them the right to withdraw a portion of the payment. More than half, actually." For a moment, the world blurred. The rain outside became a distant hum. "That's impossible," she said softly. They couldn't. "I'm sorry, Elena," Daniel continued. "I just thought you knew. The records were processed through their account. I assumed it was all agreed upon." She hung up before he could say more. The phone slipped from her trembling hand. The air in the apartment felt suddenly heavier, pressing against her chest until she could barely breathe. She sank to the floor, her knees hitting the cold tile. It wasn't just Clara's greed. It was them too. Her parents, the people she had trusted above all else, had taken what little she had left and called it family duty. In that moment, Elena understood what betrayal truly felt like. It wasn't a single stab to the heart. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Small lies, twisted truths, and the kind of manipulation that wore the face of love. For days, she shut herself off from everyone. Her coworkers noticed her silence, her empty stares during meetings, the way her voice lost its warmth. But no one dared to ask. She spent her evenings rereading old text messages from her mother and Clara. All the words that once sounded like love now read like a script. "We'll pay you back. We'll be forever grateful. You're the only one who can save us." Each line was a weapon, forged from guilt and trust. Finally, one night, she made a decision. She wouldn't cry anymore. She wouldn't beg for explanations or apologies. She would confront them, not to plead, but to see their faces when they realized she knew. When she arrived at her parents' house, Clara was in the backyard, laughing loudly with two friends, champagne glasses in hand. The sound sliced through the air like mockery. Elena walked through the front door without knocking. Her mother looked up from the couch, startled, while her father's expression immediately shifted into discomfort. "Elena," her mother said quickly, forcing a smile, "we weren't expecting you." "I noticed," Elena replied flatly, her eyes scanning the living room, the new television, the polished furniture, the subtle signs of recent spending. "Seems like things are going well." Her father cleared his throat. "We've been managing, trying to keep things stable." "Stable?" she repeated. "That's funny. I heard Clara got a new car." Must be nice to rebuild so quickly after being in debt. Her mother's face paled. Elena, that's not fair. We all suffered. No, Elena interrupted, her voice sharp as glass. I suffered. You took my home, my savings, my peace, all for her. And now I find out you took my money too? Her father stood abruptly. Watch your tone, young lady. I'm not a child anymore, she shot back. And I'm not stupid. Daniel from the bank called me. He told me everything, her mother gasped. You're misunderstanding, sweetheart. We only took what was rightfully ours. That house was built with family effort. Elena's voice trembled, part fury, part heartbreak. Family effort? You didn't pay a cent for that house, not one. Every brick, every nail, every tax payment came from me. You manipulated me into selling it, and then you took the money like vultures picking apart a carcass. From the backyard, Clara appeared, still holding her drink, her lips curling into a half smile. Oh, come on, Elena, you're overreacting. It's not like you were going to keep living in that old cottage forever. Family means sharing everything, even your house. Elena turned to her sister, eyes burning. Family means respect, Clara, not robbery, Clara scoffed. Respect doesn't pay bills. You've always had this superiority complex. You think that because you worked hard, you deserve more. Guess what? Life doesn't work that way. Elena took a deep breath. No, it doesn't. Not when you're surrounded by people who bleed you dry. Her father stepped forward. Enough of this nonsense. You'll always be part of this family, and family means compromise. Elena looked at all three of them, her heart breaking even as her resolve solidified. No, Dad, what you call compromise, I call betrayal. Silence filled the room. Clara looked away, her smirk faltering. Her mother's eyes glistened, but Elena could no longer tell if those were real tears or just another manipulation. She turned toward the door, her voice calm and steady. You took my trust, my home, and my peace. But that's all you'll ever take from me. From now on, I owe you nothing, and one day, you'll understand what it feels like to lose something that was never yours to take. That night, Elena sat in her car outside her old home for the last time. The lights inside glowed warmly, but to her they looked hollow, a false warmth hiding rot underneath. She knew they wouldn't apologize, not truly. People who could betray with such ease never thought they were wrong. When she finally drove away, the rain began to fall again. The rhythm against the windshield was steady, cleansing. She felt the first flicker of something new. Not peace, not forgiveness, but purpose. Her revenge wouldn't come from shouting or fighting. It would come quietly, methodically, with the same precision she once used to build her life. If her family thought she would disappear, they were wrong. As she reached the outskirts of the city, she whispered to herself, You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything back my way. And in that whispered promise, the fire of her resolve was lit. She didn't yet know how she would do it, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next chapter of her life would no longer be about loss. It would be about reclaiming power. And this time, she wouldn't let guilt guide her. Only truth. Elena's revenge began quietly, not with fire or fury, but with silence. A year had passed since the night she confronted her family, and on the surface it looked as though she had moved on. She had found a new apartment, small but sunlit, with white walls and wide windows that overlooked the city skyline. She worked long hours, kept to herself, and smiled when people asked how she was doing. To the world she was rebuilding. But beneath that calm exterior, something far colder and sharper was forming. She had learned that people like her parents and Clara thrived on guilt and manipulation, that their love only existed when it could extract something in return. She had spent her life protecting her family's image, sacrificing her happiness for their peace. But now she understood something essential. Peace built on injustice wasn't peace at all. It was imprisonment. At first, she tried to let go. She told herself forgiveness was strength. She even avoided her family entirely for months. But betrayal doesn't disappear just because you refuse to look at it. It lingers, grows roots, and whispers in the dark. Every time she saw her bank account struggling or had to postpone a dream because of lost savings, the anger returned. She began writing things down, a habit she had always used to calm her mind. What started as emotional journaling slowly became something else. She listed dates, transactions, and messages. The names of people who had known what happened but stayed silent. And one day, while sorting through her old emails, she found something that made her pulse quicken: a scanned copy of the original sale contract for her house. Her parents' signatures were there beside hers. Her father's, her mother's, and her own. Daniel had been right. It was official. That discovery changed everything. From that day forward, her grief transformed into purpose. Each night after work, she sat at her kitchen table, poring over paperwork, tracing bank transfers, connecting dots. She reached out discreetly to Daniel for clarification, pretending she was helping a friend in a similar situation. What he told her confirmed her worst suspicion. Her parents had funneled most of the sale money into a joint account, from which Clara had withdrawn large sums to cover her debts and, later, fund her lifestyle. Elena realized that her sacrifice hadn't saved anyone. It had only funded their indulgence. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw a post that nearly made her drop her phone. It was Clara, standing in front of a luxury resort, her hand on the arm of a handsome man in a tailored suit. The caption read, "Can't wait to marry the love of my life. Dreams do come true." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. Elena's heart pounded as she scrolled through the photos. Clara flashing a diamond ring, her parents smiling proudly beside her, all of them bathed in golden light. The engagement announcement wasn't just a celebration, it was a mockery. Clara was living the kind of life Elena had built through sacrifice. And the money for that glittering ring, that glamorous trip, that new start, had come from the ashes of Elena's home. For a long moment, Elena sat frozen, phone in hand. Then something inside her snapped. This time she didn't cry. She smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile, it was quiet, deliberate, inevitable. She finally knew what she needed to do. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about revealing them. She began gathering evidence, slowly, methodically, carefully. She retrieved bank statements, copies of sale receipts, and even text messages from her mother that subtly confirmed the transaction. She cross-referenced dates, matched transfers, and highlighted discrepancies. Then she did something that would make everything untraceable. She created an anonymous email account. Using it, she began reaching out to people who might matter to Clara's new life: her fiancé's family, her workplace, even the vendors involved in the wedding. She didn't accuse. She simply sent information, screenshots, bank documents, proof of deceit and manipulation. She framed it as concern, an anonymous well-wisher, warning the groom's family about Clara's financial record and her fraudulent use of funds. At first, there was no response. Weeks passed, and Elena almost thought nothing would happen. But then, one morning, she received a message from a mutual acquaintance. "Did you hear? Clara's wedding might be called off. Something about money issues." Elena felt her pulse rise, though her expression remained composed. She didn't reply. Instead, she sat by the window, sipping her coffee, watching the city wake up. She didn't need confirmation. She knew the truth would do its own work. By the end of that month, the entire story had begun to unravel. Clara's fiancé's family discovered not only her past debts, but also her involvement in falsifying financial documents. They confronted her at a family dinner in front of everyone. Witnesses later said she broke down crying, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that she had borrowed the money from her sister, willingly given it. But when the groom's mother showed her the documents, the bank statements, the proof of property sale, Clara couldn't explain any of it. The engagement was called off within a week. The news spread fast, from neighbors to friends to colleagues. What had once been whispered sympathy for Clara turned into public humiliation. Elena didn't attend the fallout, but she heard enough. Her parents tried to shield Clara, but their own names were on the documents. Their reputation crumbled in the small community that once respected them as a good family. Old friends stopped visiting, neighbors turned cold, and even distant relatives avoided their calls. It wasn't just financial ruin, it was social exile. A few weeks later, Elena received a message from her mother. It was short, trembling with desperation. "Please come. We need to talk." Against her better judgment, she went. When she arrived at her parents' house, the once lively home was eerily quiet. The furniture looked worn, the air heavy with shame. Her mother sat on the couch, tear-streaked and trembling. Her father stood by the window, his posture rigid, his pride shattered. Clara was there too, eyes swollen, makeup smeared, the arrogance gone. Her mother looked up at her, voice cracking. "You destroyed your sister's life." Elena didn't answer right away. She walked closer, her heels clicking softly against the floor. When she finally spoke, her tone was calm, deliberate, and chillingly steady. "No, I didn't destroy her life. I revealed what she built it on. My sacrifice." Her father's face twisted with anger. "You've gone too far, Elena. She's your sister." "She was," Elena said simply. "Before she decided I was nothing more than her safety net. Before you both decided that my hard work existed to fix her mistakes." Her mother's sobs filled the room, but Elena didn't flinch. "All I ever did was give, and all you ever did was take. You taught me that blood means loyalty, but what you really meant was obedience." Clara's voice broke, hoarse and desperate. "You don't understand. I just wanted a chance to live the life you never had." Elena turned to her, her expression unreadable. "You had every chance. You just wanted the easy way, and now you've learned what it costs." Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. Her mother reached out, crying, "Please, Elena, we're family." Elena paused in the doorway and looked back. Family doesn't steal from you and call it love. Family doesn't make you homeless and call it a sacrifice. Whatever we were, we aren't that anymore. Then she left. Outside, the air felt cool against her face. For the first time in years, she felt weightless. Not happy. Happiness was still far away, but free. The storm had passed, and though it had destroyed everything behind her, it had cleared the path ahead. Over the next few months, Elena rebuilt her life once more. She took a new job at a firm that recognized her discipline and dedication. She found a new apartment, this one with a balcony that overlooked the river. Each morning she made coffee, watered her plants, and allowed herself to breathe again. She didn't seek reconciliation. She didn't seek an apology. She didn't need either. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, she stood on her balcony, the city lights flickering like scattered stars. The air was still, the moment serene. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the victim of her family's story. She felt like the author of her own. She whispered to herself, "They took my home, but not my strength. They took my trust, but not my will. They can take everything material from me, but they'll never take my dignity." A faint smile touched her lips as she turned to go inside. The revenge had not healed her scars, but it had balanced the scales. She no longer needed to carry their shame or guilt. What remained now was clarity, the kind that comes only after fire. And as the night deepened, Elena realized something profound. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about revelation. It's not about breaking others. It's about freeing yourself. And in that quiet, unspoken peace, she found something far greater than victory. She found herself again.